Okay, here's the basic construction of the console. I wanted to kind of walk you through how I did it. As most of you know that you've seen on iBoats, I've drawn this in AutoCAD, and what I did, obviously had it drawn in a plan perspective, so that gave me the information I needed to cut this faceplate out. And I laid it out off of the dimensions in AutoCAD by hand and cut it out. These arches here, which kind of form basically ribs that I'm using to form these smaller pieces around to get the overall shape, I actually drew those in AutoCAD. What I did in AutoCAD was I basically cut sections through each one of these areas. And each of those section planes that I cut are approximately 6 inches apart, or not approximately, they are 6 inches apart. Therefore, I was able to lay out their location on this bottom piece, which I had drawn in plan. And you can kind of see if you look close my layout line. So anyhow, I drew each one of these in AutoCAD, and I kind of piled them on top of each other and then printed it out full scale and then cut each piece out. And the nice thing about doing that way, I had one piece of paper that I cut all of these out of that I used for a template. I started with the biggest piece back here in the back, then cut the next one, the next one, and the next one, etc., until I got down to the smallest piece. So that gave me all those ribs. If you look in the other direction, I took my elevation, and I knew what the maximum height or the overall profile of this was by what I had drawn in my elevation. Again, I printed it out and did the same thing. Cut that one big piece out, but what I had to do is go back each place where one of these ribs intersected it, I had to cut it, and I actually had to cut the thickness of the rib out of it too, which it worked out pretty good. I mean, I got pretty close. I mean, it's interesting. You can have like a 1/16 of an inch error, and time you multiply it by all of them, all of a sudden you get to one end and you're off by 3/8 of an inch or so. But at any rate, this worked out pretty good and pretty close. It also gave me this tapered piece back here that you can see that gives us a slope face for the instrument panel. So that's kind of the basic construction for the frame. I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you how I lay out some of these ribs on here. These aren't that smooth. I probably should have used probably like a mat board instead of the cardboard, just because of the complexity of the curves or the sharpness of the curves. But the from here up to here was about 48 inches, and I can only get the mat board 40 inches long. A couple of these, as you can see, ended up being short, but the rest of them are the full length. So anyhow, I decided to kind of go with this and try to work with this material as opposed to going with the shorter stuff and then trying to piece more pieces in. One of the things I've done on this that I haven't done on some of the other ones is I had to cut relief cuts in here. As this piece comes down, you can see it kind of tightens up the joint. Without the relief cuts, the edge of this actually kind of come out and did something like that. So I came in here, made a couple of relief cuts, and that enabled me to kind of quote-unquote bend the cardboard at these points here, so that we ended up with a full piece of cardboard at the end. Over here, I didn't do that. I ended up having to actually cut the edge of the cardboard off and taper it down, basically to nothing here at the bottom. And that's another technique too. I've done that on some of the other things that I've built. If you can see it right here on the slide out where I did that here. And I think up here on the bow, I ended up having to do that a few places. This is a lot flatter curve. It's not near as dramatic. You can kind of see where I come in here and cut in this fill-in piece. And that had to do a little bit with the fact that I skipped these. I did every other one and then came in and filled back in between. If you look here, this one here is a little bit wider here, and so I cut it to fit. But the steeper your curve, the more compound it is, the more that you're going to have to do that. As you can see, obviously the curves on this are much more dramatic and much steeper than they are here on the bow piece. So anyhow, that's some of the basic technique of cutting these curves in and kind of the rib layout. I'll go ahead and show you guys kind of how I fit some of these pieces on here. Okay, as you can see, I've used full-length strips on most of, well, actually all of this stuff so far. As we go up this curve, it's a little bit easier to work with. This part of it here has been pretty difficult. This is one of the last pieces. As a matter of fact, I think I started with this piece and added this piece. You can see how it actually tapered and cut this piece here out to fit the contours. But I still have a pretty good sized gap right here, and you probably can't see from over there, but there's a fairly good sized gap here between the rib and the back side of this. And I'm not real happy with how that's come together, but at this point in time I'm not going to tear this off. This is more of a mass model. Obviously we're not trying to win some kind of award with it, but basically get an idea of what our part's going to look like at the end of the day. So what I'm going to do is work with some shorter segments here and kind of basically fill this in piece by piece, which is pretty tedious and time consuming, but it's probably going to give us the best end product, even though it's going to be a little bit of a patchwork. So this is how we're going to go about doing it. I've got a little bit shorter piece here that was a scrap. What I'm going to try to do is fill in probably something like that. Although I could kind of do that, but I'm starting to get a big gap here, so I think I'll go ahead and fill this piece in here. And one of the things is I'm having to kind of twist this piece as I put it in, so one of the things that you can do to help it conform a little bit better is to twist it a little bit before, just so it starts to get that contour so you're not fighting it the whole time. And I've already done that, so we'll go ahead and glue this piece on. One of the other things I like to do is you glue this stuff on. If you glue too far, you get this big lump of glue and then the next piece doesn't want to fit. So what I try to do is kind of hold the piece up there and then roughly mark where it's going to fit. So when I put the glue on, I know how far to go with the glue. And we'll go ahead and do that right now. This glue gun gets really hot, which is a plus and a minus. The minus is, well, I guess the plus is, gives you a long working time, so you can kind of fiddle around, put glue on, get your part up there. You don't have to work in such a hurry. The drawback to it is I spend lots of time sitting here holding this stuff, waiting for the glue to dry, or basically waiting for the glue to cool off. If you notice on this end here, I ran this piece a little bit past the rib, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is on the back side of this glue another piece that will give me something to glue this next piece that goes down there to. If you don't do that, you end up trying to figure out some way to glue it to here, which you can do that, but given the curves and the tension on the parts, it really doesn't work out that well. So basically doing this little lap joint here gives us some place to start. We can start the next curve or the next section and see how it fits in there. Okay, here's the next section. I'm not sure if you can see it from over there, but I've actually glued another small piece back behind this one here. And our next section is going to be short too. I'm really not liking the way this is working, but I'm just going to have to kind of run with it, I guess. One of the things I did too was I cut this joint to fit. This thing had a little bit of an angle on it, and it's because, again, the curvature. So I just kind of eyeballed this, cut a little bit of an angle on my piece here so that this isn't 90 degrees. It has a slight taper to it, probably like 5 degrees. You don't have to do that, but it just gives a little bit tighter fit and a cleaner look. Again, we're not building a show model here, something to sell a client on. It's more of a massing deal, but it's part of my anal retentiveness, I guess. Go ahead and put some more glue on, and then we'll spend time again waiting for the glue to dry. It's getting really tight down here at the end, so this is going to get kind of interesting to see how I actually finish this out and make it work. So, you know, put this in here and let this set up. Okay, so I've got this piece on here. Next thing I'm going to do is go back up here and kind of fill this in. And what we're going to try to do is tie in this section here to this flat section on the side. And if you get the feeling I'm avoiding this, I am. Haven't quite still figured out how I'm going to do this. We may end up going with some smaller strips. It's going to be a lot of piecemeal in here, and I may have to add some more structure on the back side. But for this part here, we're basically going to match the joint of the one above, so that we had this section and this section. We're going to have a third section down here. We'll have another fourth section that matches this. The problem is we're going to intersect with this other plane here, so there's not like a great way to do this, or there probably is. I haven't come up with it, but essentially what I'm going to try to do here is sketch the profile I know that's below. Try to cut this piece to fit best I can. Again, this is more of a mass model than a finished model, so we'll go ahead and cut that out and see how it fits. Okay, I went ahead and filled in the rest of the side, which you guys can't see from that side over there, but I just wanted to kind of show you what I do here. I let these pieces fly along just because it's easier to try to fit the opposite end of the piece, leave whatever is left over up here, and then come back and trim them off. You can cut them to fit, but you know, it seems like you don't get as good of a finish on this side, so you know, just let them fly along, and then come back with the utility knife and just real carefully trim them off. And that usually gives you a pretty nice edge. So when you look at it from this side over here, get the camera off. There we go. You end up with a nice finish edge, or as nice as you're going to get cardboard. So anyhow, that's kind of how I do the ends. As you can see, I've filled in the rest of these pieces here. I basically cut this arc as I showed you on this last piece, put it in, and then repeated the process with these others. One of the other things that I've done here is I've glued this edge too, as well as the vertical pieces, especially in these small pieces where you can start sticking this piece to that piece and this piece to that piece. Really helps out with your structural integrity. You can see a little bit of the glue kind of squeezed out there, but again, this is just a rough model that we're building. Anyhow, you can clean that up. Even when it's still hot, you can kind of take your fingers sometimes and wipe it across there real quick. You don't want to leave your fingers in it too long because it does get hot. But next thing we got to do is fill in this piece here and then tackle the front and around here. So this should be an interesting challenge. We'll see how it goes. Okay, what I've done here is put a little backing piece in here, still hot, glued it in place. That'll give me something to let this piece die into. We've got this curve here on the bottom for our piece to die into, and then I'm probably going to have to end up putting a few little blocks or pieces in here to space this out, but maybe not. We'll lay it out and see how it works. You'll notice how I have most of the work piece hanging over the edge here. What happened is I went ahead and cut out this piece of chipboard just kind of randomly bigger than what I thought it needed to be, and then I lined it up, kind of curved it on here, and put a mark down here and one here, and those marks kind of correspond with this line going along here. So what I'm going to do now is actually cut that out as a straight line and then lay it back up there and see how it fits. Cutting it out is pretty straightforward, just a straight edge and a utility knife. Sometimes I freehand this stuff, but I think this will actually work out to a fairly straight line. So let's see here. Yeah, looks like that fits okay. So the next thing I want to try to do, actually, let me just, yep, all right, slide that down there, and then somehow I've got to figure out a way to get a mark on this corner over here, and I think that's pretty close to the corner. So just on here. As you can see, there's not a great deal of precision in this thing. Actually, it seems like it kind of does that. So let's sketch that. Cut this out real quick along that curve. And I mean, this whole deal is really trial and error like this. So that gives us a little bit of the curve there. It looks like it curves back a little sharper than when I had it. So let's try this. Like I said, it's just a lot of cutting and fitting and guessing, and this is a fairly quick way to build a model, but it's still time consuming on these curves like this. That's pretty close right there. I'll go ahead and trim this little bottom piece off here that's hanging up. Cut that off, get it out of the way. Stick it on there. It looks like this thing's starting to fit the contours. I think I can probably live with that. So this thing's not going to be perfect, but you know, that's not bad right there. So I'll go ahead and glue this on there. So the curve's not going to be perfect, but it'll fill in that hole, and then we'll have that part of it done. Okay, we've got this one side completed here. There's the back of the console, and you can kind of see how we filled in all these pieces here. There's the two that were missing up here. I went ahead and filled those in just as an anal retentive. And then these are the pieces that we cut in going down the side. If you look real close, you can kind of see where I've edge glued these two. It's not like a real precision thing. There's just enough glue on the edge to kind of hold bond these two pieces together. And then here's our piece in the front that I made out of the chipboard. That actually turned out pretty good. It's a little bit flat right in here. You can kind of see it from this angle, but you know, you get the concept. I mean, you can see this rib going through right here too. But that's the overall concept. I've got this other side to do over here. So I've got quite a bit more work to do. This thing's taken a lot of time, but kind of figured it would. One of the other things that I do when I'm doing this stuff is I try to figure out some way to hold this thing in place, because you're pushing and pulling on everything else, and eventually it gets to weigh quite a bit, so it's not as big of a deal. But this is my old build table here that I've got. It's basically 4x8. It's made out of a steel frame. This is 3/16 by 3 inch by 3 inch angle, and the nice thing about this is it gives me some place to clamp things down along the edge. It's got 3/4 inch plywood, which is like an AC fir, and then on top of it I've got this masonite. The masonite makes a great wear surface. This particular piece is probably about 7-8 years old, and it's had everything done on it, from welding to painting to cardboard mock-ups to fiberglass work. It's getting to the point where I'm about ready to pull it off. Matter of fact, this is some of the primer I think I spilt on it from Miss Morgan, but at any rate, it's always nice to have a good work surface. The good thing about this one, though, is it allows me to screw down blocks wherever I want to anchor things in place. And so when I've been working on this thing, I've had this screwed down on this side. I also had this block over here on this side, which was clamped in place here at the edge. And I had a clamp around here on the front edge on the nose. Oops. Hard to do looking at the camera, but anyhow, to hold it in place. So, you know, just another thing that I do that helps me and keeps things from moving around. So you know, we'll get back to this and see if we can get the other side finished up and see what it looks like and kind of how things lay out. May even stick a steering wheel on there and see how it fits. So talk to you soon.